Hey, what's up everybody? Mark Price here at devslopes.com, and in today's exciting video, you're going to learn how to import a 3D model that has animations and how to play those animations. And this is really cool. And we're going to be using the assets that we got from BitGem. And sometimes, for your reference, you can get things from the Unity Asset Store, and some things are built in, ready to go. So you drag them in and they work, animations already set up. But I'm going to show you how to do this manually, because you're going to run into many instances over your career as a game developer where you're going to need to know how to work with models anyway. And so we're going to go ahead and get that started right now. So let's go find our assets. I believe mine are on my desktop here. Okay, and we're going to use the zombie. And we're going to want his textures and his animations here. Notice how there's some different models here. Mobile, FBX, and micro zombie. Let's go ahead, and the animation list here. So these look good here. And these are all different FBX files, animations for him that are separated. And I don't think we're going to actually need those. So what I want to do, we'll see if it works here. Let's right-click Assets and go to Create Folder. And we're going to call this Zombie. And I'm going to take the models and the textures folder and drag them into that zombies folder. In fact, let's just double click into here, because sometimes Unity likes to freeze when we drag stuff in. And we're just going to drag these over here into this folder. Spinning wheel of death, of course, as usual. You should be used to this by now. Okay, and it is finished importing. This took about 5 minutes. 3 minutes. And we've got models and textures. If we go into the models folder, notice how there's a file here called animations list. Okay, these are the frames that the artist created when they were making the animations for this zombie, and they've kindly broken it out for us so we know what to do. Okay, such as idle, walking, biting, fly up, jump, things like that. Okay, and then we've got our two zombies here. Okay, micro zombie and micro zombie mobile, and we want the mobile one because it's more mobile optimized. We're either building an app for Android or iOS, and we should be more responsible in how we use our 3D assets. So here's our zombie. Okay, if you look up here in the inspector, notice how there's a model. Okay, this like shows the size. It talks about like normals and tangents, how the materials are used, things like that. Okay, if you want to generate colliders when it's imported. And then there's one for the rig. And what the rig is the actual skeleton inside of the model. You create skeletons in models in your various 3D programs. You can also do that in Unity as well too. And so you might use Maya or Blender or 3D Studio Max, and basically have you create bones and things like that that can move around, and they're attached to the actual skin or mesh of the model. So that's what the rig is here. And we don't need to touch any of that right now. And then there's the animations, the actual frames that has been set on that rig and mesh to actually animate. And we do want to add a couple animations here before we start working with the model. Specifically, we want to work with idle, which is 6 through 65. So let's click our zombie, and let's, instead of take 001, let's call this idle. And we said between 6 and 65, right? So start is 6 and end is 65. And we're going to loop it. So we're going to click loop time. And that looks great. I'm going to click apply. And then the other one I want is jump. Okay, whenever you click the screen, he's going to jump, and I want to see that animation. These other ones you can play with and do anything you want with, or you can even change it. You don't have to follow the exact frames that we're using here. You can pick any one of these here. Okay. And sometimes artists don't give you these, okay, so you have to kind of figure it out on your own, which is never good, but this is really important to know which frames the animations are on. And so we want jump, which is 395 to 399. And again, these are frames, meaning if you've ever used with some type of graphical program or even a movie editing program with animations like Adobe Premiere, you can click start frame, start at frame 3 and end at frame 60, and then you do some type of movement or animation. Same exact thing here. So 395 to 399. Okay, so I'm going to click the model again. We're going to create a new clip by clicking the plus button. Okay, and we're going to change its name to jump. And we're going to say 395 to 399. and we're going to apply it. So now our zombie has 2 different animations set on it. And I think he's ready to actually be imported into the game here. So I just click over here, hold down Alt to rotate, and we'll just drag him onto the screen, somewhere around here. All right. Nothing scientific, we just dragged and dropped, that's all. That's one thing about Unity you got to get used to. Like, there's lots of dragging and dropping. It's a lot different than if you're developing, for instance, for Sprite Kit with iOS development, where everything has to be done with numbers placed on the screen because there is no visual editor or interface. So I'm going to drag him over here, okay, and up a little bit. Notice how he's really dark. You can't see him. That's because he's expecting to receive light because we haven't changed the material on him yet. So what we want to do is just change that material. So I'm going to expand this micro zombie mobile up here. And his name is Brian. And there it is. There's the shader. Standard, we're going to go to unlit and texture. And now he's all bright. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate him a little bit. Hold down, or just click E, and then holding down Command or Control to rotate, to snap to the grid. We're just going to rotate him. Oops. Wrong one, actually. Select the top layer, not Brian, and then Command rotate. And I don't want him facing completely forward because you can't really see him that well. Let's just do it slightly like that. So even though he's kind of facing in an off angle, we can see more of the character. And he's a little bit small, so I'm going to hold down, or I'm going to press R and click the white for uniform scale, or make him a little bit bigger. So there's our little zombie, and let's go ahead and play and see what happens. Okay, nothing is happening right now on this character. No animations, just kind of floating there. So we need to set those up as well too. If you notice here in our animator, there's no controller for this animator. Every animation on an object has to be managed by some type of controller, or it's recommended. There's some more primitive animations you can do, but what I'm going to teach you is the way you should be doing it for your games. And so you need an animation controller, and you can do that simply by going over here to assets. We're going to create a new folder for it. So we're going to say folder, and we'll just call this animations. And in the animations folder, I'm going to right click and go to create, and we're going to go to animation controller, and I'm going to call this zombie. All right, now click your zombie in the scene. In fact, I'm going to press enter and change his name to zombie. And what we're going to do is just drag this animation controller into the slot that says controller. When you imported your object, because it had animations already, it automatically detected that from the .fbx file and created this animator component, which is really nice. We didn't have to do anything there. Okay, so we've got an animation controller. All right, this is looking really good. And what I'm going to do is double click the animation controller, and it's opening up the animator up here. I'm going to put it down here because that's where I like it better down here. And we got some layers here, but nothing else. There's nothing else inside here. It's just nice and blank and empty. So what we need to do is actually import the animations for the animation clips from our actual object, so this animator can know how to work with them. Okay? And if you want to move around here in the animator, you can hold your mouse wheel and just drag around like so. So let's go down to our zombie and our models, and we know we're using this micro zombie down here, the mobile one. And by the way, here's a hot tip for you. You're probably wondering, if I import a bunch of things into Unity that I don't use, are those going to be in my game? And that's especially important if you're working with mobile games or anything like that, because you have file size limits for app stores. The answer is no. If you do not use an object or a material or anything that is in your project, but it's still in your project, it will not be included in your game, which is really nice. But one thing to keep in mind is if you have a bunch of unnecessary stuff in your Unity project, it will take a very long time for your project to load if you're switching between projects, even over an hour sometimes, if you have that many graphics and models in your project. So just know the more things you have in your project, the longer it will take for Unity to load. And so you don't want a bunch of extra junk in there that you're never going to use. And so you can do things like just get rid of it. Okay, delete, command delete, or control delete. So here's our zombie. Okay, see there's this little arrow here? I'm going to click the arrow to expand. Okay, and notice how inside of here there's an idle and a jump. We created 2 animation clips inside of our zombie. Okay, and we can now access those. Remember, we did it over here in the import settings. Okay, and they're there for us to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this idle and I'm going to drag it over here into the animator window. And I'm going to take jump And I'm also going to drag that over here into the animator window. Now, entry just means it's the default animation that it's going to play. And so it's going to play idle. That's the default. And of course, idle is going to loop. And so if I go ahead and play now, notice how our zombie is idling. He's animating. That is how simple it is to animate or to bring in animated characters into the game. Ours was already animated for us, okay? This is a beginner lesson. We're not doing it ourselves. And all we had to do was create some clips on the mesh itself when we imported it, and then we created an animation controller, dragged it onto it, and then we dragged the clip into the animator of that controller. Okay, so this is, in this animator window here, this is the controller. Okay, this whole thing here, and we are putting those clips on here. Now, one thing that we're going to want to do is when he jumps, we're going to want to make a transition to the jump. Okay, so I can right-click idle and click Make Transition to Jump, like so. Okay, pretty cool. Great. This is all looking really good. So how about that we write some code to actually make the jump animation take place? So what we're going to do is, we're in our scripts folder, we're going to create a new script, and we're going to call this one, we could call it zombie, or we could just call it player. We probably should call it player. That makes the most sense in case it ever changed. Like, let's say that you could change your character from a zombie to a human. It would make more sense to be a player. So I'm going to change the zombie object up here. I'm also going to change this to a player. And that makes a lot more sense. And I'm going to drag the player script onto the player object, like so. Okay. And then double click the player script to open up the script editor. Okay. Looking good so far. And double click player.cs. There we go. Okay, so first things first is we're going to want to get a reference to the animator. So whenever the jump happens, it plays the animation for jump. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hold a reference to an animator. We're just going to call this anim. Okay, so we're going to say animator anim. And what we're going to do is on start, we're going to find that animator object on the player. So it's going to search through the player hierarchy in that object, and it's going to look until it finds an animator component, and it's going to get a reference to it. So we're going to say anim equals get component of type animator. Okay. The reason why you see this like less than sign and greater than sign over here is okay because it wants a specific type. It's using generics here, and that's a C# term. It's using generics to specify a specific type of the component that you're looking for. Okay. And so if I go over here back to Unity, it's kind of crashing on us here. If I go back to Unity, notice that our player does indeed have an animator clip. So when we write code that says get component, it is looking for a component on this object. Okay, so it would look for on this. If you needed to get something that's on the root here or Brian or any type of sub object, okay, instead of doing get component, you would type in get component in children or get components in children, and it would search through the whole hierarchy within that object. But in our case, it's on the top level, and we know it needs to be there. So there's our animator component, and it's referring specifically to this one. Okay, great. And our mono develop did in fact crash on us, so I'm just going to force quit it. Looks like it's gone, and we're going to open it up again. Okay, here's our file. So get component animator. Great. Now what we want to do is whenever the jump button is pressed, okay, we want to just play an animation. And we're going to do this very simply. We're not going to go crazy and try and support controls for different platforms. This lesson is not about Android and it's not about iOS. The only reason that we chose that platform is to show you that you can develop games in a portrait-like mode. And in our case here, we are just going to do some general input, such as get the mouse button. But what's interesting is Unity actually does a lot of that cross-compatibility underneath the hood. So a regular tap would actually trigger a mouse click in your code, which is nice. So we're going to say if input dot get mouse button down 0. Okay, so what we're saying here is we're calling the Unity input. So update's being called over and over and over again, right? So if player input, if a mouse button down is ever pressed, so a click, okay, and the 0 means the left click. Number 1 would be the right click, okay? So we're calling the get mouse button down function. We're passing in saying 0, saying, hey, we're looking for the left click. And if the left click happens, what we want to do is we want to say animation dot play, okay? And we want to say jump. animation.play jump. And it's as simple as that. And this script, of course, has been dragged onto our player character. So what I would like to do is play it and see if it actually works. So I'm going to click on the screen. And notice how nothing's happening. So it definitely didn't work. I think there's more work we need to do in our animator. So we can go back to our animator over here, and it probably has the same one selected as it does in our case, or you can always go to your animations and double click just to make sure. I think what we need to do is we need to create some tags for the animation so it knows which one to play. Actually, I think all these are named correctly. Oh, look at this right here. Click your zombie. 24 to 399. Our jump frame got messed up somehow. That's why. This should have been 395 to 399. Somehow that got changed. You guys probably saw that forever ago and are like, why doesn't he fix it? Let's play it and see if it works now. There we go. So pretend he's jumping. We haven't done any like force or physics yet, but look, every time we click, he's jumping like okay? Really cool, right? So this is some awesome stuff, and we did it very quickly. And to recap, what we did was we simply imported a .fbx file that was pre-built with animations and bones, okay? And the animation frames were listed, so we clicked on our zombie, okay? And we created some clips here, as you can see. And then in our animations folder, we created an animation controller called zombie, of course, which we then dragged the clips from that zombie, okay, here in the models. We expanded the little arrow there. We found the clips that we created, and we dragged them over here into the animator for it. We made a transition from jump to idle. Okay, so we right-clicked, say make transition from jump to idle, and basically whenever it's done jumping, it's going to transition to the idle smoothly. That's why you notice it looked very smooth when we did the animations for the jump. And oh, by the way, if your arrow's pointing the other way, it means we might have made a transition from idle to jump, and we don't need to do that right now. So that looked really great. Idle was set on loop on the character itself in the clip, and things are coming together. So now we've got this cool character who just looks like he's jumping, although he's not moving anywhere. So we're gonna need to get some force applied to him so he can actually float and fly. So cool stuff. That's it for now. Mark Price at devslopes.com, and we're making amazing progress, and you should be getting really comfortable in the world of Unity 3D at this point. So see you next time.